ActionSA in the Western Cape is calling for the probe into the province's Premier, Winde's R1.6 million trip to the United States. The party has asked the Ethics Committee to investigate whether taxpayers' money was used to fund the Premier's lavish trip. For more on the story, I'm now joined by Michelle Wasserman, who's the Western Cape ActionSA chairperson. Michelle, a pleasure to have you on the program this afternoon. Firstly, can you provide us more insight into the specific concerns that ActionSA has regarding Premier Winde's recent trip to the U.S.?
Thanks very much, Nhlanhla. Yes, Premier Winde went to the States, and the purpose of the trip was to assure the U.S. government that the Western Cape remained committed to the AGOA, which is the African Growth and Opportunity Act. And it's not necessarily the trip that we have a problem with, but with the cost thereof. So there was a parliamentary question about the costs, and the answer is very concerning to us. There was 535,000 rand spent on hotels, 454,000 rand on airfares, and then it seems an extra 525,000 on transportation and 140,000 rand on food and drinks, which comes to 1.6 million on one trip, which is a lot of money for a trip to the States.
Let me remind our viewers that, of course, the tab is then run by you, the taxpayer. Now, ActionSA has called for this Ethics Committee investigation. What outcomes or even actions does your party hope to see as a result of this probe?
Well, what we would like is for an independent body to have a look at the costs of the trip and the details of it, and to say whether this was reasonable expenditure or not. If it was a reasonable amount to spend on a trip for that purpose, then that's absolutely fine. But I think it's important that someone have a good look at the details and see what it was for and why it was spent, and if it was a waste of taxpayers' money or reasonable. And I think it's important in terms of transparency and accountability that happens. The Western Cape government has said that they feel that this has been fully and transparently dealt with in the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. But that's actually not the case in Nhlanhla, because the Office of the Premier is refusing to disclose the details of the trip.
Now, in the face of the Speaker rejecting ActionSA's request for a probe into the cost of the Premier Winde's trip, how does your party then plan to pursue accountability here?
Well, we haven't yet had a formal response, yes or no, from the Speaker's office. We did send them a letter and ask them to refer it to the Ethics Committee. Received a response to say that they'd got our correspondence and we're dealing with it. I've seen in the media that there's an outright no. But once we've received a formal response from the Speaker's office, then we'll be able to decide on how to go forward. What we're hoping from the Speaker's office is that if it's a no to the Ethics Committee, that it will then be to another committee that is independent and can do the necessary investigation. If not, we'll have a look at other options, for example, a referral to the Auditor General. But I really do think that this is something that needs to be looked at, so we're not just going to leave it there.
Now, Michelle, are there any specific measures or even changes that ActionSA indeed recommends to prevent the misuse of or even the wastage of taxpayer funds in the future?
Well, I think parliamentary oversight and transparency is such an important thing. And so there's not necessarily changes that are required to the systems that are in place, but we would like to see those systems used efficiently. The Speaker's office, for example, is supposed to be the bastion of oversight of parliamentary ethics and making sure that everything runs as it should. We do have concerns, however. We have referred matters to the Speaker's office and the Attorney General. I don't know if you'll remember earlier in last year, there was the matter of the Deputy Speaker, Beverly Schaefer, who was found by the State Attorney to have wasted, I think it was an amount of 158,000 rand, and that was supposed to be looked into by the Speaker and the amount recovered by him. And as far as we know, that hasn't happened. So instead of changes, we would like the Office of the Speaker specifically to be able to fulfill his role properly.
Let's speak about how ActionSA then intends to engage with the public on issues of government accountability and transparency, especially in matters related to the use of public resources here.
Well, it's important for us to be able to find out. So we're very committed to oversight and making sure that when we pick these matters up, either through communities or through the media, that we do take them up and drive them and ensure that they're dealt with properly, and also bring them to the public's attention so that the public is aware of what's happening. But I think more importantly than just shouting about what's wrong is taking action steps and doing something about it. So if this doesn't get referred to the Ethics Committee as we've asked, to then have a look at which oversight body would be best placed to be able to take this matter further.
But more broadly, can you outline the key principles or even standards that ActionSA as a party believes that public officials should indeed adhere when undertaking international trips, particularly with regard to financial transparency and accountability?
Well, that's the most important thing, is transparency and accountability. For ActionSA, also the rule of law is such an important thing, to make sure that everyone is treated the same. And if people overstep the mark, that they're then held to account. I think one of the biggest problems in South Africa is that we have rules that are not implemented. So we have great legislation, but it's just not applied. So it's very important to have systems in place, and particularly a government that is committed to implementing the legislation that is there. So you have ministerial handbooks, you have systems in place that make sure that there isn't overspending, that there isn't wasteful expenditure, but it's a question of that being implemented. So what you need is a government that cares enough about the people of South Africa to not waste their money. And I think that's something that the voters are going to have to decide on next year in 2024's election.
Michelle, let me thank you for your time. That's Michelle Wasserman speaking to us on the concerns raised by ActionSA regarding Premier Alan Winde's U.S. trip expenses. They're calling for more accountability related to this particular matter.